Welcome, everybody, to Odds and Ends Life, Entertainment, Theater, and the Arts. I am Andrew Joseph Kozlowski, and with me is my good friend, the world-class bass player and music producer, and our co-host, Mr. Cool himself, Mr. Clyde Bullard. Hey, Clyde, what's up?
Hey, man.
Looks like you're in a different area of the world there, buddy. What are you doing?
Well, I'm trying to be cool, so I got my shades on, and, I'm being cool because we're dealing with the Apollo tonight.
We sure are, boy.
The Black Mecca.
Go ahead.
Well, it's very special for me because as a young man, I went to the Apollo almost every week that I could afford to go, so I could see these great performers that have adorned the history of the Apollo. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to see James Brown live, Black Ivory, the Delphonics, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. I mean, it was just incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
And these are the shows that helped me to know for certain that I wanted to be a musician like that.
Well, the Apollo Theater in New York City is one of the oldest and most famous music halls in the United States, and probably the most celebrated theater associated almost exclusively with African-American performers. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and was the home of Showtime at the Apollo, a nationally syndicated television variety show consisting of new talent.
That's right.
A cultural icon, the Apollo has had significant impact on the development of American culture and its popularity around the world. Over the course of its more than 100-year history, the Apollo has long served as a source of entertainment and often as an initial opportunity to discover live music, dance, and theater. Many adults cite the Apollo as their first exposure to live performance through their attendance at the shows at the theater. In addition, the Apollo Theater Education Program extends the Apollo's commitment to enhancing the life of the community. The education program focuses on 4 distinctive areas of learning and engagement: residencies, workshops and tours for schools, curriculum materials aligned to state and national learning standards, and study guides derived from the theater's history. Career development for teens and adults throughout the Apollo Theater Academy, and discussions and lectures for the public that highlight the history of the Apollo and its impact on American art, culture, and entertainment. Pretty special place, all right, Clyde?
Absolutely. Well, there is no other place like it in the United States or probably on planet Earth. Yeah. So the Apollo is, it is what it is. It's irreplaceable.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's watch this short video on the history of the Apollo Theater. Take it on, Gio.
people don't know that so many of the legends in entertainment either got started here or have played the Apollo Theater.
Now this is our wall of legends. Now these are photos of people who performed here back in the 60s to sold out shows. Sam and Dave, you know, they had that song, I'm a soul man.
Well, some of my favorite performances at the Apollo have always been the Motown review. You talk about the Temptations, the Supremes, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, all those groups on one show. It was heaven. The Apollo Theater was built in 1914. The building was originally called Hertig and Siemens New Burlesque Theater. Then in 1934, the building was renamed the Apollo Theater. They based the name Apollo on the Greek god that represents the sun and music, entertainment, poetry. Businesses started thriving. People would go out and buy new costumes or outfits to wear to a show at the Apollo. They would go and visit the restaurants and eat before and after a show. It was a time when black culture, theater, literature, activism, it was very, very popular in this area. The influence that these performers had as part of that Harlem Renaissance was felt by the owners and the customers who attended this theater at that time.
Talent is born here, music is born here, culture is born here. This place defines culture. It's the place when a major icon like Whitney Houston passes away, this is a place where people come to mourn her. So it's not just a historic symbol, it's more a living cultural vessel.
The stories that never get told.
We are thrilled to have with us a man who was at the center of everything that went on for many years at the Apollo Theater. Ladies and gentlemen, the former director of touring and production at the world-famous historic Apollo Theater, Mr. Stephen Jones. Welcome to the program, Odds and Ends, Life, Entertainment, Theater, and Art, Stephen. We're thrilled to have you with us tonight.
Hey, gentlemen, I'm glad to be here with you.
The list of the people that you worked with is quite incredible. So I think what we want to do now is give the audience an opportunity to see where you came from and how you got to New York and the Apollo Theater. That's probably a good idea, because we could go on for days talking about all the people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure.
Right.
But if I'm correct, and stop me if I'm wrong,
No.
Your early years, was that Michigan?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan in 1957.
Uh-huh.
February 26, 1957. Cold and snowy day.
And what kind of childhood? What was music a part of your life when you were young?
Well, growing up in Flint, Michigan in the late 50s, early 60s was an Flint was an industrial revolution town. He had 3 shifts a day, first, second, and third shift. He had all the plant manufacturers were there, Buick, Chevrolet, Chrysler, Fisher Body at that time, AC Sparkplug, the paint company. So, you know, growing up middle class, blacks in Flint was good in some respect, and it wasn't so great in others' respect. I came from a single parent family home, but my grandparents really looked after us and took care of my mom and my sister and my brother, and we really didn't know any difference because they took so good care of us. But my grandparents were church founders. So we had a lot of church music in the house. And my grandfather was an outdoorsman. And so he hunted and fished and got rabbits and pheasants and deer. But he also danced the polka. And he liked polka music. I don't want her. You can have her. She's too fat for me. Much too fat. So here we are dancing around. But we also had in the middle of the living room, but they used to call back in those days, we had a big hi-fi. And where all the music was played. And we played music every weekend. And we danced, and, you know, we had a good old time. My house was always busy because not only did we live there, but my uncle and my aunt and his daughter lived there as well, and then my grandparents. And then we had all this extended family. So growing, and, you know, we were church people. We belonged to the church down the street. My grandparents belonged to the church 2 blocks down the street. So we were always busy, you know, with getting ready for every first Sunday communion with the Mogan David wine and making the crackers and all of that stuff for communion. And
now, Stephen, you said that they founded a church.
Yeah, my grandparents were church founders. They founded 2 churches in Flint, a couple of churches in Detroit, and a couple of churches in Indiana. Church of God in Christ. Yeah.
Kojic.
Huh?
Kojic.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But you know, God-fearing,
so you had
God-loving
some
people.
music, and gospel music played a part in what went on too, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh, of course, man.
Amazing.
a lot of all of that, you know.
Yeah. Now you go from Michigan, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. You went to Washington to go East Washington University?
I was a all-conference football player. And I got a chance to go out to my brother. My oldest brother, Keith, was a wheelchair Olympic coach. And Wheelchair Olympics in '74 was in Spokane, Washington. And he really loved it out there because he had never been out to the Pacific Northwest before. And so he went to the campus and told them about me. And so they invited me to come out. And so I went out. I graduated in '75. And right after July 4th, my father put me on a plane and sent me out to school. And I got ready for football, you know. And it was quite the adjustment because you're going from Flint, Michigan, which is a predominantly Black city, to Eastern Washington University, which is in Cheney, Washington, with about 15,000 students and about 100 Black students. So the guys there were football players, basketball players, baseball players, and we're on the track team. All sports, you know. So here I am out in the middle of the wheat fields, getting ready to go to school. And unbeknownst to my brother and myself, they had a brand new theater on campus. Now I got to jump back a little bit because when I was 11 years old, when my mom married who I knew as my father, Aaron Smith, who was an educator, he got me involved in junior theater. So every Saturday, kicking and screaming, I used to go while everybody else was watching cartoons, Bugs Bunny, Beanie and Cecil. I'm in the theater making flowers and wheat paste and painting and learning about lights and all of this stuff, you know. And I did that throughout, up through high school. So I had a theater background, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, you know. But my father, God rest his soul, he had some plans for me that I didn't really know anything about. So anyway, here I am at Eastern Washington with, you know, football's going okay. I really get hurt by the third game. My knees are really bad. And so I left the team and I was taking introduction to theater. And Dr. Devin Boyd said to me, he said, are you interested in the theater? I said, well, you know, I'm not quite sure. Well, we'll see. So he introduced me to Professor Bollinger, Norman Bollinger. And Norman Bollinger was part of this Bollinger Brothers union thing. And these cats were like serious technicians, serious carpenters, painters, lighting, soup to nuts. He also wrote a book, Backstage A to Z, which we all helped write as part of our deal, being undergrads. You know how they make those undergrads work, free labor, you know. And so he decided that I was going to be his protege. Now I'm the only black guy in the program. And
oh, that's cool.
And so now I'm learning all of these skills. The first thing he taught me was all the carpentry stuff. We built furniture, we built flats, we built all kind of stuff out of wood. And then we went from that into learning how to do some audio stuff and reel-to-reel tapes and splicing and all of that stuff. And then from that, we went into, had to do some wardrobe and make a shirt and all of that crazy stuff. And the last thing I did was lighting and electricity, which I kind of fell in love with. And by my senior year, I was over the lighting program there. And really just got involved, got involved in lighting and electricity and colors and all of that stuff. And so when it came time to graduate in '79, the question was, what was I going to do?
And where were you going to do it?
Yeah, and where was I going to do it?
Where are you going to do it?
So my father suggested, he said, look, while you're on the road and you're still, in a college student frame of mind, you should think about going to graduate school. And so we applied to Boston University. We applied to UNLV and San Diego State, those three colleges. And thank God, I don't know how to this day, other than it was God's grace that I scored so high on my SATs that I qualified to get into all three colleges. Now, BU, when I went to Boston, after living in Washington State for those 4 years, I wasn't accustomed to being in a city environment. And it was a little bit too overwhelming for me because I got to Boston and I was like, well, where's the campus? And they said, well, it's all right here. I said, well, how do you get to the classes? They said, we got to hop on the T. It's the train. Oh, the train. Got to take a train to class, huh? Okay. So I wasn't too crazy about that. And then I went to UNLV and really liked it there. It was a great program because they were working with all of those casinos down there, But they told me the program was full and I had to wait a year. And I knew I couldn't wait a year because if I waited a year, it wasn't going to happen. And I got down to San Diego State and they had a really wonderful theater program. And so that's why I ended up going to school. Now, I don't know if it was because of my numbers or whatever, but when I got there, they were somewhat thrown back that I was black. Because that was an all-white program.
How did you know that? How did you know that?
But when I showed up and they looked at me like, whoa, are you sure you're in the right program? What's your name again? Steve Jones. Yeah, well, your name is here on the list. But I could tell because the dean of the theater department, Dr. Don Powell, what he did was he took my assistantship and moved me from theater or across the street to the dance department. So as opposed to being in the theater department as a one of the TAs over there. I became the TA over at the dance department, which, you know, was kind of jacked up, but little did they know that they were really helping me out. Because now I got to teach a dance lighting class to 30 of the prettiest girls on campus. You know what I'm saying? And I had the opportunity to take the time to take the jail book, because every weekend we were doing somebody's recital. And I said, well, let's start at 101 and work our way down to, you know, 130 something, and let's see what these colors do. So I got a chance to take the time to use colors, write what they did, and I built myself a color book. And we did dance every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for 3 years.
Right.
You know, and it was interesting because the way they treated me there really wasn't nice, but I still got a great education because Don Paul also took my graduate keys away from me, so I couldn't use the graduate lab. And when I told my father about it, my father, being the man that he was, he says, look, don't worry about it. Call me tomorrow. I called my father the next day, and my father had me go downtown to a drafting store, and I got myself a brand new spanking Muto Japanese drafting table and arm. And brother, I was in the front row, and I could do it in my house.
Now, I got a question before you go on, Stephen.
Yeah.
What, did you miss football at all? Or did you just fall so in love with lighting right away that it kind of just, you never looked back?
I miss football a little bit, but when you're working around all these pretty girls, nah.
Yeah.
And when you're working with dancers, they don't mind taking their clothes off in front of you either. So I'm like, this is where I need to be right here.
So now you're working in lighting.
Quick changes.
You're learning your trade in lighting now.
Yes.
You're in San Diego, and you're going to go on until about 1982, right?
Yeah. Well, also the beauty of being at San Diego State was Dr. Merle Leslie and Dr. Bellingary. Those were Bellingary was my heart and soul there. He took it on himself to make sure that I was going to graduate.
Beautiful.
So he taught me how to study. He taught me how to use the library. He taught me how to do my research papers. And he just made it easy for me to get through the process. Because college for me was really never difficult. And it's really about completing the assignments. Whether the grade you get on them, it's good to get a good grade, but did you finish? Did you finish what you started? And so he taught me how to complete things. And Dr. Merle Leslie was this computer genius dude who had a relationship with a company called Strand Century. Strand Century made San Diego State a beta testing site. So we, in reality, was part of a beta testing team that built the first lighting computer at San Diego State University.
Okay. Yeah.
So when I graduated and got to New York, I was ready to go.
Mm-hmm. So how did that translate into a first job? So now you've got all this wonderful background and experience, more than most young fellas that come out of college would have.
Yep.
But now what do? You come back to New York, and
you come to New York,
yep,
and you let everybody know you got all these credentials, you got all these papers, and everybody look at you like you're black and you can't really know that much, and you're crazy, and we're not gonna hire you.
Now, what year are we talking about? 82, 83?
82.
Yeah.
83.
So still predominantly there was the feeling that you had to crack that barrier, huh?
Yeah. People, I tell you what got me through the door was the fact that I knew how to run the console. So, it was a young lady and a young man, Emery Taylor and Jeannie Faulkner, who ran the Harlem Cultural Console. Now, I came here and slept on the floor of my sister's best friend. His name was Alde Lewis. He was a tap dancer. He was in My One and Only and in the movie, and great Broadway tap dancer. So he introduced me to some people, and Jeannie and the Harlem Culture Council had this thing called the Dance Mobile that they did at Symphony Space once a year. And so I became the lighting designer for all of these B and C dance companies. And that's how I got in the door, because a lot of people just didn't want to deal with me. And in fact, even though I had these credentials and everything, I don't know if I intimidated people or, what it was, but she got me in the door. And then from there, the people at BAM heard about me, Brooklyn Academy of Music, and we did a thing called Dance Black America. And Rod Rogers and Elio Pomari were doing 2 dance pieces. Elio did a piece, his world-renowned piece called Junkie, and Rod Rogers did his piece called Box. And I went there as their lighting designer. And so when I went up to the booth to work with the programmer on the lighting, they went to lunch. So he handed me the manual and said, "Look, son, look over the manual, and when I get back, we'll try to program the board and see what happens." And so I didn't say anything to him. So when he left, what I did was I programmed the board. And when he got back, he said, "Okay, you ready to program the board?" Huh? Yeah.
He said, let's begin. You said, it's done. It's done.
It's done, man. He said, "That's impossible." He said,
Whoa.
you couldn't have learned how to use this board in that short of a time. He says, "I don't even really know how to use most of this board." Yes. I said, "Well, look, my man, all you got to do is hit the go button and we're in there."
That's right.
He said, "Okay, you're going to come with me." And he helped me downstairs and took me to the general manager. He said, "I don't know who this young man is, but whoever he is, he needs to be our resident line designer here at BAM, because he's doing stuff with this board that I don't even know how he even made him do what he's doing." And so that's how I got my residency at BAM for a very short time, because from that came a phone call from a man named Douglas Gray, who was the production manager for Harry Belafonte.
Who you have sitting behind you. That's a wonderful picture of a young Harry Belafonte.
Yeah, man. So Harry was looking for a line designer because at that time, Tom Skelton, who had designed Harry's lights, was an older gentleman, and he wasn't going out on the road with Harry. So they called me in for an interview. And so I went in for this interview, and, Doug and I got along real well. Harry walked in the office and said, "So you the new hot stuff in town, huh?" I said, "Well, I don't know about that, Mr. Belafonte, but, I study lighting, and, that's what I do." So he said, look, we're going to give you a 3-month contract.
Wow.
And if you work out, we'll see how you work out. And I said, well, thank you. I said, I appreciate the opportunity. And then I told him, I said, to be honest with you, this has been a long time coming. And he says, what do you mean by that? I said, well, when I was in the 5th grade, my father's brother brought us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That was the year that Keep Your Head to the Sky came out.
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Earth, Wind, and Fire. And that was
Yes.
one of the first concerts I saw. Now, we didn't stay there that long because they started smoking and my uncle wasn't having it. So he made us get up and leave. 2 nights later, we went to Heinz Hall. And he said, I want you to put on your best clothes. And I'm like saying, well, why? He said, because we're going to a first-class big-time concert tonight. I said, well, who we're going to go see? He said, Harry Belafonte. I'm like, huh? And man, I remember that concert because they were singing Banana Boat. And they was also
Dale.
singing Hole in the Bucket. I was like,
That's
oh,
right.
man.
Matilda.
Oh, yeah, man. And so Harry said, oh, you saw me when you was in the 5th grade. I said, yes. And then again in 1979, when I graduated from college, my father, everybody flew out to Washington because of all the children, I was the first to really graduate from college. And so that night after graduation, we went to the Opera House to go see Harry Belafonte.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So now check how this story ends up. Harry hires me. He gives me the tour itinerary. The first stop on the tour is at the Opera House in Spokane, Washington, where I last saw him, where I worked as an apprentice.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Serendipitous.
Yeah, man. So
Isn't
I
that
just told him, I
something?
said, man, this was meant to be, man.
Yes.
So you end up doing quite a few things as a lighting designer. What makes you take the next step? What happens then? From lighting you go to?
Well,
I mean,
Harry,
technical directors and production managers, man.
I was with Harry for 15 years.
Was he an easy man to work for? Was he easy going? No. He was a slave driver?
He was a very professional. Things had to be in place. Not to say that it was bad by any means, but he was a taskmaster. He didn't take anything for granted. He was a first-class gentleman. His company was a first-class run organization, and that's what he expected from you. No backsliding. No, everything has got to be right, straight. Everything got to be right on target. His mantra was, every night is the first night.
Mm-hmm.
Do not cheat your audience. If I told the joke in Chicago and in Michigan, I want you to laugh at it in Cincinnati like you heard it for the first time.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the greats had that attitude.
Steve Jones, my stage needs to look pristine every night. The legs need to be in the right place. The lights need to be done. We carried the canvas for him, and that had to be laid out for each show. Helped him move and slide on the stage a lot easier with them nice leather shoes he had on. But yeah, he was a taskmaster, but a good taskmaster, and everything had to be in place. And you also had to look the part. So him being who he was, took me out and bought me a wardrobe. If you were going to go collect, if you were going to be the company manager and you were collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars for Harry Belafonte, you get that check every night, you had to look the part. So your shoes had to be shined, suit and tie, always clean, hair pressed, nails, everything. You had to look the part. It was, he did not believe it. One of his other sayings was, and I'll come back to it later, but something about poverty is not an excuse for something. But no, you had to look right, man. And we traveled right. I mean, he paid people properly. He took care of people properly. So you felt like, yeah, man, you know, this guy he's paying me top dollar. I got my own room. I get paid every Friday. I get per diem every Monday. I got first class food. He feeds us. He takes care of us. He's clothing me. I got 8 suits. I got my own road case. You know, I got a different suit to wear every week of the night, just about. Socks included. And the band was the same way. The band had socks and underwear.
Wow. Hey, man, this is a very important show for me because the Apollo Theater is world renowned as being in the Black Mecca of Harlem. And for me, growing up, I went to the Apollo every chance I could. That helped define to me what was the excellence in Black performers and performances. You know, I saw James Brown, Black Ivory, you know, the Delphonics, you name it. I went there as much as I could. And so many stars played at the Apollo. I don't think there's any Black entertainer you could even name in any genre, jazz or R&B, that didn't perform at the Apollo. What would you say about that?
Well, for me, you know, the Apollo, it was the Black Mecca for entertainment. I mean, if you were Black in America at one point in time, after it became the Apollo, because prior to it being the Apollo, it was Hertiz and Siemens Burlesque House.
In 1914.
Yeah, way back then.
That's
and
right.
Then when the Schiffman family took it over, they began to bring Black entertainment into the Apollo. And one of the first shows that they did was Amateur Night.
Oh yeah.
And that's how people began to get their recognition, you know, coming in every Wednesday night and singing in front of a crowd that could either boo you or cheer you on and stuff like that.
And what about the Sandman? If he wasn't good, the Sandman would come and jerk you off that hook, right?
Yeah, man. So I mean, that was the first real kind of like amateurish show forever. I mean, for years, you know. It's too bad. I mean, we ended up having Showtime at the Apollo and stuff like that, but it really never came into its own like you know, the rest of the shows did. But it's
well, you had Frank Owens though, right? You had Frank Owens as the music director for that show.
Yeah, Frank Owens was one of the musical directors, and then
Ray Chew,
and but yeah, man, the Apollo, man. I mean, I was there from 2001 until 2016.
Wow.
And I saw a little bit of everybody there. Got a chance to really do some miraculous shows with any and everybody, you know. It was really, you know, for a production guy to be able to work in a house like that, man, I mean, Nobody has those kinds of, very few people have those types of opportunities to work in an environment with first-class entertainment on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis, you know.
Yes.
Because every day there was somebody of quality coming to the stage. You know, you didn't have
Gladys
no
Knight and the Pips,
slouches.
Smokey Robinson. Tell me about some of the people you work with that you are most impressed by. Who stands out?
Stands out. I mean, they were all so wonderful. You know, me and Gladys.
Was Stevie Wonder ever there? Was Stevie there?
Oh, hell yeah. Stevie was there. Stevie came a couple of times. You know, Stevie and I've known Stevie a long time. You know, Stevie was there and Gladys was there. And the last shows I did at the Apollo was under the umbrella of Ron Weisner Entertainment, which we got a chance. We went to Chicago and met with Oprah to ask her to do an Apollo Legends concert series. She agreed to do the series.
Was that the concert with Hall & Oates?
No.
Okay.
No. And so she agreed to do the concert, but she wanted to do it in Chicago. And we're like, at her studios, we're like, you can't have an Apollo Legends concert series.
Doesn't make much sense.
In Chicago.
Right.
You got to do that at the Apollo. So she agreed to do it, and so we did 4 nights. The first night was Smokey Robinson, and of course he killed it. You know, being who he is. You know.
Sure.
I mean, it got, for as old as he is, that dude still sounds good and looks as good as he ever could, man. I mean,
baby, let's cruise away from here. Don't be confused. The way is clear. And if you want it, you got it forever. This is not a one-night stand, baby. Performing at the Apollo is like coming home for me, man, because I grew up performing at the Apollo.
Yeah.
And his music is timeless.
Sure.
The second night was Gladys Knight.
And the Pips?
And her brother, Bubba.
Her brother. Okay,
Pip.
good. Yeah. Yeah.
One Pip. But
One Pip, okay.
that was a very emotional concert because she dedicated her concert to Maya Angelou, who had just passed away. And she invited Stevie and Dionne Warwick to come on and sing "That's What Friends Are For."
Oh, beautiful.
And brother, there was not a dry eye in rehearsal, let alone for the show that night.
Keep smiling, yeah. Keep shining, knowing you can always count on Steve. For sure, yeah. That's what things are for. In good times, in bad times, I'll be on your side forevermore. Yeah. That's what friends are for. Oh, keep smiling, keep shining, knowing you can always count on me. For sure, that's what friends are for. In good times and bad times, I'll be on your side forevermore. That's what friends are for.
Then the third night was one of my all-time favorite groups, Earth, Wind, and Fire,
Oh my God. At the Apollo?
at the Apollo, baby.
Oh Lord. Was
And,
Maurice White? Was Maurice there?
had passed. Maurice had already passed.
Oh God. Okay.
So here we are on stage with Philip,
Erdine.
Verdine, and Charles. And I'm telling them, I'm saying, guys, look, man, I need y'all to take this back to Earth, Wind and Fire 1970.
Oh yeah.
Like they said, come here,
Power.
Steve. They said, come here, let me tell you something. We're gonna bring it, we're gonna hit it hard. But you gotta remember how long ago that was. And none of these guys, with the exception of us three, was in the band. I said, you know what, guys? I forgot how old we really are. But they did a hell of a show, man. And then the last night was my boys, the Isley brothers.
Ooh, yeah. Ronnie
and Ernie, man.
Ernie, yes.
Boy. Man.
How was that? That was beautiful.
Oh, buddy, man. You know, I couldn't have planned a better last series of shows to have done at the Apollo, other than that Apollo Legends series with those four groups who were not that I personally know, and that, you know, I enjoy. I listen to their music at home. You know, it's one thing to like people, it's another thing to really listen to their music.
Get down. Somebody scream. Apollo to me now is like in our living room with the audience, because we played from so many big places with other people, and like it's like performing for invited guests that really know about you, and they're here in your living room, and you can do anything you want to do. Ladies, this is a special song for you. Yeah. Well. Yeah. That's how it goes. Yeah. Yeah. Woo. Drifting on a memory. Y'all know that. Ain't no place to ride. And with you, yeah, loving you. Oh yeah, yeah. Days will make a way for now. All we'll need is candlelight and a song.
You know.
Right.
And
Were the concerts free for the public, or was it admission price?
it was free for the public.
Whoa.
Stephen, this was 2015, 16?
16.
16.
2016.
Yeah.
Spring of 2016. Yeah.
Are
but,
these
you
concerts available anywhere? Can they be bought on DVD anywhere?
I think they're still online with
okay.
Oprah's own Apollo Legends series. I think if you go online, and you might be able to hit it on YouTube or something like that. I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but other than those things, you know, James Brown was always, you know, amazing when he came there with his bands. I did 3 of James Brown's concerts at the Apollo, and he was, you know, very professional. I mean, in terms of the sound and what it sounded like, what it looked like. Those cats, man, they had that down to a science, man. It was like, I mean, when he hit his hand and moved the stuff, man, the band had signals, man, and they did the thing. And I was like, wow, man, look at this, man. This guy is You know, not only is he singing and doing his thing with all his feet movement and body movement, but he's also orchestrating the band. You know, break it down,
Same
bam,
time.
do this,
Sure.
bam, do this. I was like,
Sure.
dang, man.
Mr. James Brown.
First time I came to the Apollo Theater, I started singing real hard. I'd been throwing my tie out everywhere, and they was eating it up. I threw it out at the Apollo Theater, and they threw it back to me. I said, James, you got some work to do.
I understand that Michael Jackson and Prince and many performers use James Brown's movements and microphone techniques as the paradigm that they use to model their stage performances by studying him.
Yeah, well, I tell you, Michael Jackson at the Apollo was an incredible evening. He came there to do a special event for Bill Clinton's initiative, and Michael came in and he was upstage right by himself, and I went over and we spoke for a minute, and really nice and just quiet, you know. Quiet dude, man. But when it came to performance, man, I would say of all of the performers I've ever seen perform, Michael Jackson took performing to a whole nother level, because each song was its own performance. Each song had its own costuming and staging, and I mean, it was like incredible. We spent about 4 days building Michael's stage at the Apollo. We had to take out 6 seats out front, bring in these industrial 4 fans.
Why?
So
Why?
When Michael wanted to blow his costumes and smoke and stuff to go up, he had to have these fans blowing, man.
Okay.
And he had a lot of, you know, a lot of smoke, a lot of lights, a lot of, you know, pyro stuff on stage, man. But it was well done. It wasn't overbearing, and it was timed right. And you know, I don't exactly know, you know, technically his production team and him really worked close together to pull all of that together to make sure that it fired at the right time and it looked right. Because a lot of times people do these things now and they're just all over the place and they don't make no sense. It don't go with the music. It's just, what was that for? You know, but Michael was like precise.
Now, did Michael have a live band with him, or was it tracks?
Michael had a live band with him.
Okay.
But you know, Michael was the king of that man behind the curtain stuff. So, you know.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
They had a lot of playback going on.
Really?
A bit. Yeah, because I mean, you got to think about it. It's difficult to do the movement that he did. All that time, all that jerking and all that stuff, and be able to stay in voice properly throughout.
Without being winded.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to say, you know, he did a lot of that, but they did some of it, and with the Pro Tools and all of that stuff, I just want to say that for me, in spite of all of that, Michael, he did it in a very specific speciality kind of way that didn't take away from the professionalism of the show itself. Because you got people that used to come to the Apollo and it'd be like, the band ain't playing nothing. It's all track, you know, and it's like, what the heck is what is that about? You know, but Michael, you know, they played that music and he sung, I would say at least 90% of the time.
Wow.
You know.
Now, what about Michael's security? Did he have a lot of security guarding the doors or what?
Well, you know what? No, he did not. You know, Clinton was there with his security team.
And that was enough. That was enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really wasn't that kind of a concert where you needed to have, because it was a VIP guest list only, you know, people. So it wasn't a whole lot of, you know, crazy fan people there. You know,
fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. So Clyde, obviously, we're going to do 2 parts with Stephen. This will be the ending of our first part show. And we'll be bringing him on real soon to do part 2 of our interview with him.
Yes, we have more odds and ends to connect with him.
We sure do, that's for sure. Well, folks, we thank you for tuning in tonight. We want you to stay advised of all the events by following the Josephine Foundation on our Facebook and Instagram account. Again, a special thanks to our special guest, Mr. Stephen Jones. On behalf of my co-host, Mr. Clyde Ballard, our producer, Mr. Gio Vitozzi, and myself, peace, strength, and love until we see you next week on Odds and Ends, Life, Entertainment, Theater, and the Arts. Good night, everybody.
And stay bright.
Amen.